right, so far we've been looking at being given a function rule. We've been given a function rule, and then we are evaluating that function rule for different inputs. Well, now let's see if we can come up with our own function rule ourselves based on a table. So let's see if we can come up with a function rule based on values given in a table. So remember, your x values are always your inputs, and your y values are always your outputs. So let's see if we can come up with a function rule that relates our inputs to our outputs. So let's look at our first input. The input is 1. When we plug 1 into our function rule, we will get the value of 3 as our output. So what is happening relating? So think of it as a function machine. When we plug in 1 into that function machine, what's happening in that function machine that spits out the number 3? So what could be one thing that, how do we go from 1 to 3? So I'm thinking, well, one possible way to go from 1 to 3 is to add 2. When we add 2 to 1, we get 3. Well, now this function rule would have to work for all of our inputs and outputs. So let's check it. So let's check it for our input. When we have an input of 2, we're going to get an output of 6. So let's try that rule and see if I add 2 to 2, do I get 6? Does that work? No. So let's try again. Let's try again with another possible function rule. So we know that plus 2 isn't going to work. What's another way to go from 1 to 3? Well, what if I multiply 1 times 3? So let's check that and see if it works for the second input here. So 2 times 3, does that equal 6? It does, so it works. Let's keep trying it. So if we multiply 3 times 3, do we get that output of 9? We do, so it works. So it looks like our function rule is going to be that we're going to multiply our input times 3 to get the corresponding output. And now let's write this as a function. So we know to write something as a function, we always write f of x, our input, remember that's always our input right here, equals 3 times x, 3x. So that's going to be our rule, is that we're going to multiply our input times 3, and that will give us our output. So this is going to be our function rule. And you'll get some practice with that as well this week, is writing a function rule from a table. So again, you're looking for a pattern when you do that relates the input to each output, and it has to work for each input and output. Just like we tried our first rule, we tried a pattern and it didn't work for all of our inputs and outputs, so we had to try again. And that's how we write a function rule.